Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Jackie Yockey of High Adventure Ministries. And today, my very good friend, Barry Siegel, right from Jerusalem, Israel, is going to be doing an episode of his series, Roots and Reflections. Oh, it is wonderful. And it's about different places in Israel. You're going to be there to see and learn some biblical teachings right in the Holy Land. Come on, let's go see what Barry has to say.
On this Roots and Reflections, we discover Ein Kerem.
The ancient village of Ein Kerem is associated with the Beit HaKerem of Jeremiah and the city of Judah, where John the Baptist was born. Today, it's a suburb of Jerusalem, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. According to the Mishnah, large stone blocks quarried in this valley were used in the construction of the temple altar. A tradition recounts that Abraham camped here before his meeting with Melchizedek.
It is believed, though, that Ein Kerem is actually the biblical Beit HaKerem.
According to the Copper Scroll, discovered in the Judean desert, there's a treasure hidden near the spring. Actually, it says at the reservoir of Beit HaKerem. On the left as you enter, dig down 10 cubits, silver coins totaling 62 talents, which works out to more than a ton of silver. I really wonder what the neighbors would think if I started digging. Let's do it quietly, right here. 10 cubits. 10 cubits? That's 15 feet, or 3 meters. Wow, look! The New Testament tells us how Mary, the mother of Jesus, Yeshua, came to visit her cousin Elizabeth. Elizabeth, as we know, was pregnant with John the Baptist. But tradition tells us that these two women met together at a well. Why, the women, they spoke about gossip. They probably talked about what recipe they were cooking for a meal for Shabbat, and who was marrying who, and of course, who was pregnant. And that was a big subject in those days. Children all over the place. And therefore, tens of thousands of Christian visitors come to revere this site as Mary's well. And they sometimes drink the water or just touch the water to their faces, believing that there's healing, there's something holy about it. And many people through the years believed that drinking from this well would actually bring some kind of holiness to your life. But of course today, the sign says it's not advised to drink the water. But let's see what happens. Whoa, I'm feeling really pregnant.
In the Second Temple period, Jewish women enjoyed more rights than their counterparts in other ancient societies. They could own property and received basic education, at least a few years of schooling, which meant that there was a high literacy rate among Jewish women. I asked Dr. Petra Helt, a Hebrew University lecturer, about the status of women in the time of Mary and Elizabeth.
Anna, for example, she was a rich lady. She had her own house near the temple, which today is in the old city. Anna was rich enough and well-trained that she decided to dedicate her only child, Mary, to the best education that she could get at the time, which was she put Mary into the education at the temple, in a school there from the age of 3 until the age of 15, and it was in that time that she learned and studied there tremendously. And one of the results of her studies, I think we can see in the Magnificat, in the Gospel of Luke, when Mary gave grace to the Lord for choosing her from amongst all the women to carry Jesus Christ. So I think this is a wonderful, wonderful example of how free women worked at that time. We have much information about women in synagogues at that time. They participated fully in the services. They were reading from the Torah. They participated like men in prayer, etc. So much so that they when they went to live in the diaspora, like in Corinth, the famous city, Greek city, that they behaved there as they did at home, acting freely, working freely, etc. It was Paul who wrote to the women in Corinth, don't do this any longer. You are living in a different society. Cover your hair as those Greek women do. Don't speak in public as those Greek women don't do. All in order to help those free women to behave in a society that was not as free as a Jewish society at that time.
Ein Kerem is known for the whole story of the birth of John the Baptist and the story of Elizabeth and Mary.
Amazingly, even after 2,000 years, John the Baptist's name dominates Ein Kerem's environment. Christians have built churches here since the 4th century, commemorating the life and ministry of Yeshua's predecessor. The current church of John the Baptist dates to 1674, built over the foundation of Byzantine and Crusader structures. Left of the main altar, steps descend to the grotto of the birth of St. John. Statues of his mother and father stand on either side of the main altar, and a Latin inscription above the lintel says, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, for he has redeemed and visited his people." These were the first prophetic words uttered by Zacharias after the birth of his son. He had been made mute since the angel Gabriel appeared to him in the temple sanctuary. Zacharias' full prophecy is inscribed in many languages around the church courtyard. On a hill opposite is the Church of the Visitation. It is believed that the house of Zacharias and Elizabeth stood here, and is where Mary stayed with her relatives for about 3 months during the visit to Ein Kerem. The significance of the Visitation Church is in reference to Mary, known in Hebrew as Miriam, in her proclamation prayer of thanksgiving to God, which is recorded in Luke chapter 1, "And Mary said, My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior, for he has regarded the lowly state of his maidservant. For behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed." Mary's Magnificat is inscribed in 42 languages on the wall facing the church. Also, a modern sculpture depicts the meeting of the 2 Jewish women. Nearby, we enter a chapel with paintings illustrating events in the lives of Elizabeth and Zacharias. What is the missing link here in the village of Ein Kerem, which is Hebrew for spring of the vineyard? When we look at the lives of Elizabeth and Mary, whose names in Hebrew were Elisheva and Miriam, we come to an understanding of our roots that in fact these were 2 very godly Jewish women who gave birth to 2 wonderful Jewish boys that would change the course of history.
Jesus is a Jew. He was brought to the face of this earth by a Jewish woman. She was very much a Jewish lady, and Jesus was circumcised the 8th day. Mary went to the temple to be cleansed after 40 days, and we know the priestly class from which Joseph came. We also know the priestly class from which the father of Mary came, who also served in the temple, and of course Elizabeth, with the high priest as her husband, was also part of the family. So it was a very well-established Jewish family in that period of time.
From Mary's Spring, most roads go uphill. This one is protected by a rather hoarse guard dog. I think he has laryngitis. In the hills of Ein Kerem is a precious work known as St. Vincent's, a hospital care home for the severely handicapped children. This is truly a work of care and compassion.
It's not a really hospital. We are a home for severe handicapped children. We have now actually 59 children from the age of 5 until 22. And their backgrounds are Jewish and Arabs and Muslims, Christian, and they come from all social and cultural backgrounds. Some of them of the Negev, some of them of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Ashdod, Ashkelon. So this is one of the kind of therapy that we can provide to the children. Of course, the main therapy is the physiotherapy. That's because some of the children are so spastic, they cannot move their legs and their hands and their arms, so they need a special therapist. But here in this jacuzzi, which gives in the same time fun, but also it's very optimal for therapy.
Maybe from a biblical context, it reminds us how John the Baptist was in Ein Kerem. But he didn't have a jacuzzi, did he?
Of course not.
A loving ministry for those who need care and compassion.
High Adventure Ministries, Voice of Jerusalem, has planted trees in Jerusalem since 1975. These trees continue to grow among the trees we are still planting today. Be a part of fulfilling biblical prophecy by planting a tree in Israel in memory of your loved one for just $25. A beautiful certificate will be mailed to you from the Holy Land. Call 1-800-517-HOPE. That's 1-800-517-4673.
These hills are alive with the sounds of legends, traditions, and history. Some say John's father is the same Zechariah who as high priest is mentioned by Jesus as the one murdered between the temple and the altar. According to the apocryphal New Testament, Proto-Evangelium, it was Herod who ordered Zacharias killed because he was protecting his infant son John when the king sought the death of all children under 2 years of age in Bethlehem and in all its districts.
And she was married to Zechariah, the high priest in the temple. He obviously was very much loved by the people, and he was slaughtered by Herod's soldiers for not giving away John and Elizabeth, his wife.
The apocryphal New Testament book of James describes the murder of Zacharias in the forecourt of the temple. But God miraculously protected Elizabeth and her infant son John in the hills above Ein Kerem. Let us read here where it says, "But Elizabeth, when she heard that they sought for John, took him and went up into the hill country and looked about where she should hide him. And there was no hiding place. And Elizabeth groaned and said with a loud voice, O mountain of God, receive thou mother with a child. And immediately the mountain clave asunder and took her in. The two were concealed by the mountain. For as long as Herod's soldiers sought their destruction, Yeshua found refuge in Egypt with his mother and Joseph. John found it here under these rocks."
These are the stories we know about them. And again, here I think we have a very courageous woman, faithful to the Lord and not giving in to the political circumstances of the time.
Investigating these stories and traditions has made me hungry, so let's go back to Mary Spring and look for a typical Middle Eastern culinary treat to satisfy the palate.
Let's try a Middle Eastern specialty drink called Sahlav. And this is one of the best places I know to get it, right here in Ein Kerem. Let's go find out what it's made of. But what's in it?
Made of milk, rose water, and sugar, and corn flour, coconut, cinnamon.
So we have all in here, coconut.
No, you don't have here.
You're going to add it.
You're going to add to it.
So what does the rose water do?
This is a good smell.
A good smell.
Yes.
Do we taste it?
You can taste this.
Okay. So I'm going to have 2 Sahlav, and it looks and smells wonderful. One for me, and of course, one for you. We've got to give this Sahlav a try. Let's try it. This is the best. You've got to come to the health center on the corner by Mary's Well in Ain Karim.
The mountainous area around Ain Karim is the most forested in all Israel, with pine, cypress, terebinth, oak, almond, and hawthorn. One native tree, the carob, is associated with John the Baptist, known as St. John's bread or locust fruit. The carob pod is dried and in powder form is a cocoa substitute.
Right in the heart of Ain Karim, sitting under a carob tree, some scholars believe that actually John the Baptist, when it refers to him eating wild locusts and honey, ate the carob. Now, that was a food that was normally associated with those of a poor means of living. But today in health food stores, we know that carob was actually a very, very healthy food. And that is what is thought that John the Baptist ate. Now, the carob seed was uniform in both size and weight. In ancient times, this was actually used as a measure of weight for such things as precious gems. Therefore, that's where we get 1 carat with 1 carob seed. Ladies, carobs are a girl's best friend. Kitty, what do you think about the carob? I think he says it's strictly for the alley cats.
James 5:16 says, "The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." The Wailing Wall is reported to be the closest place to the heart of God. The Ark of the Covenant was here. For hundreds of years, people have prayed and written their prayer request on papers they have inserted into the wall. If you have a prayer request, High Adventure Ministries, Voice of Jerusalem, has people in Israel standing by to take your urgent needs to the Wailing Wall. A postcard will be mailed to you from Jerusalem. You can call 1-800-517-HOPE. That's 1-800-517-4673.
Another important place linked to John the Baptist is a recently excavated cave near Kibbutz Suva, a short forest hike from Ain Karim. If John was born and grew up in Ain Karim, and his ministry accomplished in Beit Abara beyond the Jordan where John was baptizing, then Suba was his training ground. Here John's calling was defined.
We are in a site that we call the Cave of John the Baptist, that got its name because of a series of incisions of drawings that have been carved into the walls of this cave. And they show the image of John the Baptist and other symbols connected to John the Baptist and Christianity. We have one image of a person. It has the same symbolism of John the Baptist. He has long hair. He has a hairy garment that is mentioned in the scriptures as a camel skin. He's holding a staff in his hand. And there is an image of an animal or a sheep standing next to him. This image, in all the Christian art all over the world, the image of John the Baptist is always described in this way. A person with long hair wearing some fur or camel skin on him and holding a staff and a sheep standing next to him. All the Johns in all the Christian art always are described this way, and we have this image over here. Now, of course, this image is very primitive. It's not very beautiful. It's done by a simple person who took a chisel and chiseled this shape out of the wall. Another image is the decapitated head of John the Baptist, which is located exactly opposite the image of John the Baptist himself. And again, this is another image that is very well known and important in the Christian story about the way John the Baptist lost his life to Herod Antipas. John the Baptist, of course, is from Ain Karim, and it is a walking distance. It's 1 hour walk to this place. It's possible that as a young person, John the Baptist was in this cave, and he practiced or tried or developed new ways of baptism. This is like the missing link between the Jewish mikveh and the Christian baptism that was later on. In the Jewish mikveh that we have today, also, a person, he puts himself inside the water and he covers himself completely in the water, and then he comes out, blessings. In the Second Temple period, they held a unique kind of mikveh/baptizing ritual over here, involving also this stone that we see over here that has a niche, the shape of the right foot, and people could have put their foot inside and anointed it with oil in a very unique way. But also the site does not start from the time of John the Baptist. It is a much earlier site. It starts in the first temple time, the time of King Hezekiah. This is actually an underground reservoir that is part of a big water function that has two stories. Above us over here there are pools and a big corridor and a spring all hewn in the rock in the 8th century BC. So for Jewish people, we see the importance from the beginning, from the early biblical time, through the Second Temple time, when the time of John the Baptist himself, and the Byzantines that drew these drawings later on. This wasn't made originally as a mikveh. In the First Temple time, there were no mikvehs. Mikvehs are Second Temple. This was a big water reservoir. And you can see on the walls they have plaster. This plaster has been dated to -800. That is more or less the time of King Hezekiah. The top area, it's possibly a clay factory, a place to make clay for pottery. So we see all these remainings that lead to the conclusion that this could be a clay factory. And this was done in the First Temple time.
Suva is one of those typical sites found all over Israel where one can cut through historical layers like through a cake, representing thousands of years. Another stratum is located at the monastery of St. John in the desert. This Franciscan monastery stands on a slope below Even Sapir overlooking the Sorek Valley. It includes a garden and spring associated with the verse, "So the child grew and became strong in spirit and was in the deserts till the day of his manifestation to Israel." Muslims called the site Ain el Habis, the spring of the hermit.
The monastery of St. John in the wilderness, as it's called, is approximately an hour's walk from here on the other side of Hadassah Hospital. Basically what you have there is a Franciscan monastery with a cave where they believe that John spent his hidden years before he was openly revealed to Israel.
According to some traditions, this is the actual grotto or the place where John the Baptist lived.
There's also a natural spring of water there. It's right adjacent to the cave. It's quite small, quite deep, and definitely fulfills the requirements of a mikveh in the sense of water running in and water running out. In a sense, you can say it's a model mikveh.
Our word of the week is mikveh, or ritual immersion. Hold your breath. What does mikveh mean?
Mikveh is a spiritual cleanliness whereby people go into a ritual bath, and what happens is they dip themselves in. It depends on different times. Some people go in, they dip themselves in one time, some people do it 7 times.
Mikveh is a spiritual bath used by all Jewish people, whether they want to or not. Actually, no, can we cut that? A mikveh is a spiritual bath used by both Jewish men and women at various times during the year. Men can choose to go when they want. It's customary to do it before you get married, but it's also some people like to go before the Sabbath, some people like to go every day.
All right, tell us, what's a mikveh?
Okay, a mikveh is a ritual bath that is crucial to the Jewish law, in particular the laws of family purity, which is why women go as part of their menstrual cycle and have a period of separation from their husband, and it's said to enhance the marriage, and that's a crucial part.
To be fit for use, the mikveh has to contain sufficient water to cover the body of a woman of average size, with water originating from a natural spring or rainwater. Religious Jews are forbidden to reside in places where there is no mikveh. This rule has been in effect since the days of the Second Temple. The baptismal pool at the monastery of St. John in the desert certainly fits the qualifications of a proper mikveh, with sufficient water to cover the body of a woman of average size, in this case my own daughter, seeking immersion.
In the traditions of my forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and in Yeshua the Messiah,
I immerse myself to new life. Amen.
Should I just go down?
Yeah.
2,000 years ago, baptism involved self-immersion, Jewish style. The baptizer served more as chief witness of the event, rather than physical dunker of the person being baptized.
I mean, the whole understanding of tevilah in itself means immersion. So there's not even a question here about drops or anything like that. And of course, if we're talking about a mikveh, it's clear that it's immersion, and it's full immersion.
So again, here we have a very strong connection between the immersion rituals that were there and baptisms. And we have immersion baths, like in Qumran we have those mikvaot where you go into one side down as an unclean person and go into a mikveh, and then you come out another side, different steps, as a clean person and uncontaminated, so to speak, regarding the sins of the world.
I've been immersed before, but this is the first time I've been immersed after my heart has really changed, and I really love the Lord with all my heart right now, and I'm just on fire for Him.
Thank you for being with us in Roots and Reflections, our program from Israel, bringing you insights to the land of the Bible, its history, natural beauty, people, food, tourism, and much more. Your donations to help produce Roots and Reflections are much appreciated.
Well, thank you for joining me again today. That was wonderful. I also want to thank my good friend Barry Siegel, the president and founder of Joseph's Storehouse. He's our partner and friend. Now listen, let me remind you, the Bible says, for all those who want to prosper and who will prosper, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
So